I'm Lori Robinson.
And I'm Gray Mitchell.
Looking at today's digital business, certainly we're seeing organizations are automating more things. They're starting to bring in all sorts of different types of devices. They're moving to the cloud. They're even doing Internet of Things and pushing compute resources out to the edge. And the digital environment, often referred to as the digital mesh, is resulting in what I call an expanding identity universe. And in this environment, we have more identities than ever before. Where once we just focused on managing employees and partner identities, now we are in a world where we're having to manage machines, consumers, and things. Also, our resources and compute power is increasing. So, where we used to manage things on premises, we now have moved to a world where we have mobile and cloud, and even edge computing is coming in. We also are dealing with more and more regulations than ever before. So back in 2002, Sarbanes-Oxley really changed the game of identity and access management, where we started focusing more on who has access to what and how they got it. But since that time, we see more and more regulations coming in, forcing us to put in more identity controls, whether it's PCI compliance, NERC, FedRAMP, et cetera, or if it's more privacy-oriented regulations like GDPR or California's new privacy laws, and many more that are coming down the pipeline. In a nutshell, we have more and more that we have to manage, and it adds to the complexity of the environment. I want to look at this from a different angle as well. So, kind of taking the same three axes, but looking at how it's expanding. First, it's in scale. It used to be that we had a finite number of identities, well-known identities that we managed. In today's environment, there's an infinite number of identities, sometimes into the billions of identities when you start adding in consumers and things and bots. Our control has moved from a very centralized control model where we controlled the applications themselves, but certainly the policy and even the identity, to a very distributed environment where you have things like bring your own identity, or you're receiving attributes about, say, your consumers from different entities. And really the control is very distributed in today's environment. We also have moved from a focus on the business, where we're all about protecting business assets and making sure that our environment is secure, to having to also worry about protecting individual users' privacy and giving them some control and visibility into how data that we're collecting about them is being used. Often when we think about privacy, we jump to a conversation about consumers, but really we're seeing more and more, especially as we start to bring in AI and ML and we're gaining intelligence about our employees and our partners, we're having to consider privacy when it comes to all users, whether it's a consumer, an employee, or a partner. Interestingly enough, our governance initiatives have really been focused in this blue area, where we were dealing with employee populations in a finite environment, centralized control, and protecting business assets. And now in today's world, we really have to look at expanding outside of that. So I want to jump in and see some of the IAM trends that we're seeing here at Sailpoint. First is frictionless user experience. We hear a lot about the death of the password or passwordless authentication, but really that's part of a bigger initiative around ensuring that the user experience is smooth. So we see things like, of course, the death of the password and multi-factor authentication. We also see things with consumer-like shopping experiences and shopping carts, and really starting to integrate digital assistants and things like Slack to make it so users are interacting using very lightweight touch systems. So that's trend number 5. Trend 4 would be digital identities. So this could be machine, thing, bot, or consumer identities, but moving to a world where we don't necessarily have a contractual relationship, say with an employer or partner, but instead we're relying on a digital footprint from that identity to authenticate and authorize that user. So in the world of things and bots, we see an RPA, we see a lot happening around how do we manage a machine identity using either a PAM tool or an IGA tool or some type, or even access management tools to authenticate and authorize that entity. And how do we govern a machine or things access? Also, from a consumer perspective, we hear a lot around decentralized identity and blockchain. Trend number 3 would be cloud. And I like to look at cloud, AI, and ML and hyper automation, the last 3 trends, both from an enablement perspective and from a leveraging perspective. So with the cloud, we're certainly looking at how do we enable access to the cloud? How do we make sure that users are getting the access to these highly complex cloud environments that are highly volatile, where we have applications coming up and coming down, and how do we govern that access? How do we leverage cloud technologies? We're seeing more and more identity and access management solutions moving to the cloud. For Sailpoint, of course, we have our Identity Now offering, which is a SaaS-based offering, but that's a major trend across all IAM providers. In the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning, sort of the same thing. How do we enable AI and ML? So lots of talk around securing the data pipeline and making sure that as things move from databases through data integration technologies and into business intelligence technologies, that we're securing that pipeline and enabling it. But also, as we get learning data and we start to build intelligence, and we get that output, that we're protecting that and we're ensuring that the right users have access to that intelligence that was generated. Leveraging AI and ML is certainly a very big trend in the IAM market right now. And oftentimes we talk about it from the perspective of reducing risk and detecting threats in our environment. And certainly that's the case. Looking at it from an IGA or Identity Governance and Administration perspective specifically, we're looking at things like peer group analysis to see when users are behaving like each other and then something happens and we have an outlier. Or using AI and ML to determine what roles should look like, learning users' behaviors to understand these users act like each other. And then, of course, threat detection when a user does something that's out of policy, triggering some type of an event to remediate their access. So we're going to see a lot happening around AI and ML, particularly when it comes to reducing threats in our environment. But the number one trend I see happening in identity and access management today is around hyper automation, or what is being referred to as autonomous or self-driving identity and access management. And that really is taking all of the other technologies, whether it's AI and ML or cloud or RPA-like technologies, using digital assistants and all of these up and coming interfaces that we have, and really automating the identity environment end to end. This can be from an administrative point of view or from an end user point of view. But think of a world where when someone needs access, instead of requesting access with a web-based interface, they simply ask their digital assistant saying, Siri, I need to book a flight, and it knows to provision access to, say, Concur or some other travel booking system. And if I don't have that access, triggering some type of approval workflow and actually provisioning that for me so I can directly go into the system. That's an example of a user experience that would be using automation, but we certainly see it happening on the back end. And again, that's kind of a combination of all of these technologies coming together to provide that self-driving identity and access management experience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Gray Mitchell, to kind of talk about what he's seeing at IDMWORKS.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. I totally agree with the identity universe expanding. I would go so far as saying that it's exploding, and as a result of that, I have to say though the technology is really outpacing the identity and access management teams. While the technology is improving and so many features and capabilities are available to these teams, uh, the teams aren't getting the support or the growth or the backing to be able to take advantage of them, and it's uh, exactly uh, because of some of the things that you pointed out. The security and privacy gaps keep uh, getting bigger and bigger. The more and more regulations that come out, the more and more the identity teams have to uh, adjust and adapt to these new regulations. The new use cases, as you spoke around the Internet of Things or bots or just improving their overall identity program, they're becoming stretched too thin. Uh, and because of that, they're not able to take advantage of some of these new capabilities that are available to them to do even some of the more basic or foundational types of activities. So we're seeing an increase in governance complexity. We're seeing the need for teams to be more highly agile to be able to adapt to these new requirements. But what's actually happening is teams are getting bogged down in operational or administrative tasks, and they're not able to devote any of their time to be able to even take advantage of some of the cool and awesome and helpful technologies that vendors are bringing to the table. And so, what my and IDMWORKS recommendations to be able to kind of handle this is, in order to leverage these new technologies, teams are going to have to embrace a more agile methodology. So instead of trying to roll out long, multi-year projects, they're need they're going to have to start doing piecemeal type projects that are from 3 to 6 months in length. They're going to have to get support from the executives to show what the business value of identity is to the company, uh, and be able to deliver success stories in a more rapid manner. And then lastly, uh, our recommendation is that identity teams are going to have to explore managed identity offerings from companies to be able to free up their staff to be able to work on these more strategic initiatives while allowing the managed service provider to handle the lower level administrative or operational type tasks. What this will do is this will allow companies to leapfrog in the maturity level of their program and start taking advantage of the new features. Once they're able to take advantage of these new and awesome features that companies like Sailpoint are bringing out, then they'll be able to uh, leverage the power of automation or machine learning and artificial intelligence. But what we're seeing right now is there's almost a plateau right now with our customers, and they need to be able to uh, make a significant jump in maturity. The way to do that is to explore managed identity service providers, embrace a more agile uh, methodology to how they're rolling out their activities, and then ultimately leverage these new technologies that are available to them. And so, Lori, just to ask a quick question, from what we're seeing with our customers, how has SailPoint been able to react to uh, the customer needs when they get kind of in these situations where they're not making as much progress in their programs? Sailpoint's obviously coming up with this fantastic technology, ways to help the customers do all these new, cool, uh, and very necessary uh, activities. But when the customers get kind of bogged down or plateau in their identity journey, what would your recommendation be?
Yeah. I mean, I think it kind of goes, it's sort of cliche, but I'm going to use Cell Point's theme, which is rethinking identity, because I think we do get hung up in our experiences of the past, if you will, where we were dealing with very brittle and rigid systems that required a lot of customization. And I think that technologies and services, frankly, have both. There's a lot of innovation that has happened. We've gotten a lot smarter about best practices and use cases. Some of that's already programmed inside of your IGA system. And then, of course, the services side, they have their pocket of tricks and their best practices.
Sure.
So I think it's really rethinking and understanding that our environments around us are changing very quickly. They're very volatile. I mean, even if you're just talking about the cloud and you're just talking about employee-based use cases, think about what happened with COVID, where we all of a sudden moved to a remote working environment, and organizations have rolled up and rolled down cloud applications very
Yeah.
quickly. We just have to be able to respond to that. We can't be stuck in a mindset that it's going to take us 6 months to a year to deploy a connector. And so I think we have to think more agile. We also have to get out of the way of ourselves and start thinking about the 80-20 rule, right? Like
Right.
20% of your applications are going to require that high governance and probably deep provisioning. The other 80%, maybe you can get away with more high level generic roles and things like that. So rethink some of the assumptions that you've brought with you from the past. And I will say this is I agree with you. We have to start embracing newer technologies. I
Yeah.
see people who are really slow to adopt, and maybe it's from an investing perspective and not having that sponsorship you talked about. But whatever's holding you back, you need to look for ways to start to move towards this innovation, because I really think that cloud, AI, and ML are changing identity and access management in a way that makes it much easier to deploy and configure and run in the cloud, if you will. Um,
Yeah.
and you can really start to focus on the business process side of it and getting your policies in the system the way you need them.
What we've seen so often is that whoever the sponsor is of the identity projects uh, haven't really nailed down the best way to get the support behind their projects. Uh, they'll go in and talk to their business leaders, and they'll use the fear, uncertainty, and doubt type of angle. And that might work for one or two uh, projects or initiatives, but to do a whole program, they really need to put a strategic, holistic program together that's backed behind by business value, uh, business enablement, uh, and risk reduction, and be able to actually map that out. And IDMWORKS, along with Sailpoint, have many tools to be able to help customers be able to do those types of activities. Well, that was certainly an interesting discussion. I would like to thank you for your time today. And please, if you have any questions, please stop by our virtual booth. Once again, I'm Gray Mitchell with IDMWORKS.
And I'm Lori Robinson with Sailpoint. Thanks for joining us.